we made it through the design process. So your design, which is due, I think, sometime in April. April 4th sounds about right to me, or sometime early in April. You can look it up on Canvas. Your job is to produce a document that contains 4 sections: the strategy, the scope, the structure, and the skeleton, along with a prototype. And a prototype, we said, were actual HTML and CSS files, along with the images that you need, and so on. And consider the prototype to be a rough draft of your website. So you should be able to show the prototype to someone, and it should be far enough along to where people can critique it and say, yeah, I like the way it's laid out, or maybe the navigation needs moved over this way, or maybe these colors are a little too bright, maybe we should subdue them a little bit, or the background image is a little confusing, or whatever. All right? So what we're going to do at this point is talk about actually building your site for your project, or for any project. You've done the design, you've done the wireframes, and we're going to then build the HTML and CSS for a prototype. Finishing up the page then is just a matter of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, making sure you have all your content in place and so on. So you just have to finish it up. So we'll talk about that step. And we're going to do this, really the primary topic of the next 3 or 4 classes is going to be using CSS to give your page a certain layout. Okay? So far, all of our pages have been, even though we've been able to change the color on them, for the most part, our pages have been, boop, one thing after another. That is called the basic CSS flow. All right? We're going with the flow. So that means that the first thing on the page appears on the top, the second thing appears next, and so on, in a nice stack. And in CSS we use something called the box model, where every block tag you can think of as like a box. And if we don't arrange the boxes, they just get stacked up on top of each other using the flow. But we can use CSS to actually position them and change things around. So we can put things side by side in columns, for example. All right? Or we can put things stacked on top of each other, or some things on top of each other, other things in columns, other things off to the side, or whatever. So we're going to explore a number of different techniques in CSS to position the stuff on the page. And we're going to make sort of a series of prototypes that sort of take our basic design and show it a bunch of different ways. I want to start off by showing you a site called CSS Zen Garden. And CSS Zen Garden is a site where they've taken one web page and they've let graphic designers redesign the page any way they want to. So they've told graphic designers, have at it. In fact, you can get the code and you can make a design of your own if you want. All right? And what they wanted to show is just how flexible CSS is. How you can take the same web page and style it all sorts of different ways. So there's a lot of options as far as how you style the page and how you get it to be laid out. So this should be sort of an inspiration to you to think outside the box and to see some of the things that you can do in CSS. It's even good sometimes, and I don't require it for this class, but I probably should, to make multiple prototypes. because then you can put them side by side and you can ask your customer, which prototype do you like better? Do you like A or better? And they might mix and match. They might say, I like the color scheme used in A, but I like the layout in B. All right? So if you can present users with options, it's very difficult sometimes for users to be able to describe exactly what they want from scratch. But anyone can take a look at something and criticize it, right? It's sort of a human nature thing. It's hard to tell people what you want, but it's easy to criticize. All right? So, let's go and let's look at CSS Zengarden. Let's keep this in the back of our minds as we go through this unit to say we really do have a lot of different possibilities on how we're going to lay out our page. So, let me pull it up. Here is CSS Zengarden, and if you look at it, let's pick out a few things on the page as sort of our benchmarks, as sort of our landmarks. There's the phrase CSS Zengarden. There's the words, the beauty of CSS design. There's view all designs, a demonstration of what can be accomplished through CSS design. The road to enlightenment. So what is this all about? So what is this about? And so on. So this is the basic default layout. All right? Looks nice, attractive. We can then go, though, and we can pick a different design. For example, this. Notice we have the same things on the page that we had in the other example. CSS Zengarden. The beauty of CSS design. A demonstration of what can be accomplished through CSS-based design. The road to enlightenment. As amazing as it might sound, this and this are the exact same HTML file. They just use a different CSS file. So they're able to take one HTML file and style it radically different. And when you know CSS well, you're able to do that. And therefore you can give your customer options of how you want it to look. Let's pick another one. This is a different design still. CSS Zengarden, the beauty of CSS design. A demonstration of what can be accomplished, the road to enlightenment. So what is all this about? So what is this about? These are all different CSS files applied to the same identical HTML page. The only thing that's different between those is the CSS file that they reference. So you can get the HTML file if you want and look at it. And then they give you the default CSS file. So you can look at the default CSS file, or the default HTML and the CSS. And then you can go into the CSS and just edit it to your heart's content. Okay, now keep in mind that some of the people that did some of those are among some of the top graphic designers in the world, right? I mean, I couldn't make pages probably that looked as amazing as some of those, you know, so don't be discouraged by that, how great they are. Be encouraged by, once you sharpen your skills and have a lot of tools in your tool belt, you can make pages that look all different kinds of ways. All right? And that's what our aim over the next few weeks is going to be, to look at different ways that you can lay out your pages. So we're going to start with and implement a very basic wireframe design. And I think we've already done this before, so it will kind of be review, but we got to start somewhere. I'm going to develop a series of pages, a site, that implements this wireframe, where there's the banner on the top, navigation here, content area here, and finally a footer area here. All right. So that's going to be our wireframe for the site. We're going to do it. We're going to do a website. I was struggling walking over here, thinking of a topic to do our website about. Does anyone have a good topic? If not, we'll go with mine. Sure. Let me go out on the limb and
Coronavirus.
Oh, I don't want to do anything depressing. We want to do happy things. We want to be Bob Ross. We want to do a happy little website. All right. Let's do interesting places in Ohio. Fun places in Ohio. All right. Hey, there are some, right? Okay. So I'm going to start off, and this is a formula that I'm going to do. And this is sort of the formula that I take whenever I develop a website. Keep in mind that many pages on the website, or let me finish my thought. Many pages on a website typically have sections of code in common. All right? So for example, if we have this page, if we're doing a little small website about interesting places in Ohio, so maybe we have, let's say, a home page, and then we have 4 places that we define as interesting. So we're just going to keep it small. All right? So we have our banner that explains what the site is about. Interesting places in Ohio. We have our navigation, which is a series of links. We have our footer, maybe how you can contact the person that owns the website, my email address or something like that. These 3 sections are probably going to be the same or very nearly the same on every single web page. All right? Again, look at most web pages. Look at Amazon or LC's web page or eBay. There's sections of the website, or sections of each web page that's identical to every other page. And then there's sections that are different. Okay? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first create a template for my web page. And I'm going to create a template that is meant to sort of contain the common stuff on every page. And then I'm going to put some extra stuff in there just kind of as a placeholder, so that later on I'm going to add my actual content in there. But to start out in my template, I'm just going to put some dummy text, some Greek text. I'm then going to create a CSS file for it, for my template. And because it's a prototype, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I do want to spend enough time to make it look good and to make it look complete enough so anyone looking at it can judge whether they like the design or not. Once I do that, once I have my template HTML page and template CSS page, I'm going to start cloning my pages. I'm going to copy the template. I'm going to make a copy of it for each page I want in my prototype. All right? And then I'll make the prototype. I'll change each individual page to contain the custom content for that page. So, let's just make up a few things that we're going to have on this site. We have a home page. Cedar Point. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Pro Football Hall of Fame. And Grandpa's Cheese Barn. That's probably the 4 best things in Ohio, right? I mean, it's kind of hard to argue. You might have other choices, but I'm sticking with these. All right? So that's what's going to be on our website. We're going to have these four different places and our home page. Now, our prototype doesn't have to contain every one of these. Our prototype could consist of just the home page and maybe one of these. And the user will get the idea, well, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame one will look similar to the Cedar Point one. You know, there'll be pictures of the attraction and a little write-up about it, maybe directions on how to get there or the address or whatever. So if I do one of these, the person could easily say, well, the rest of them are probably going to be a lot like this, right? So I don't have to do all these pages for my prototype, but I should at least do probably a couple of them. And I will want the navigation to work. So I will create links even if the pages aren't complete. All right. So let's go ahead and let's make first the HTML page template, then our CSS page, and then we'll clone our HTML page for all the pages in our prototype. And we'll then customize and complete some of the pages to finish up our prototype. Now, before I start cloning my HTML pages, I want to make sure that the HTML that's common to all my pages I've thought through, and I hope I've gotten it right. All right? So if I have those 3 sections that are going to be in common on each page, I'm going to want to hope that they're right. Why? Because once I start cloning them, if I have to go back and change something, I have to change it in multiple places. If, for example, I forgot a link in my navigation, and I've cloned the page 4 times, all right, and I realize that I forgot the link, I would have to go back and make that change to all the pages that I've cloned. Now here's the interesting thing. The CSS, I'm less concerned about getting that perfect once I've started cloning. Why? Because the CSS is in its own file by itself. So if I decide to change something in the CSS, I just need to change it in one place, and that change will take care of it on all my pages. So, once I make my template, I want to make sure the HTML in the template is complete, and I've gotten the common sections of the page correct. And the CSS, I can fine-tune that after I've started cloning it, because there's still only one place to make my CSS changes to. So, I'm going to go in here and I'll create a folder going to start out by going into Notepad++. And oddly enough, that doesn't work. So I'll go this way. And I'll start putting in my HTML for my template. So, I'm going to put in all the stuff that's going to be on every page, right? We talked about that first or second day of class. That on every page we're going to have a doc type. On every page we're going to have an HTML tag. On every page we have a head section. And that head section has a title. And remember, I can fit it in however I want to. The amount of white space I put in doesn't matter. So whatever I think is most readable and easy to see and easy to understand, that's what I'm going to do. All right. I'm then going to put in the body. And my wireframe, if you remember that, I had 4 sections drawn. I had a banner, a nav, content area, and footer. So I'm going to use 4 of the HTML5 structure tags to define those areas. I put the word banner, but the actual name of the tag is the header. The nav section is the nav section. I'm going to put a section tag here. And I'm going to put a footer section on the bottom. Now, more than likely, because remember, one of our goals in web design is to make our pages look consistent. So we want our pages to have a consistent look to them. If you don't have a consistent look to the web page, you can actually kind of confuse people and have people think that they're on, maybe they clicked on a different site by mistake or whatever. So we want our pages to have a consistent look. So we'll accomplish that by, number 1, making this template and cloning all of our web pages from this template. And we'll also make it by creating a CSS file and adding all the CSS to a single CSS file. And that way, if we make a change, the change will affect every page. So what I'm saying in a nutshell is, more than likely, these 2 sections will be the same on every page. The footer will probably be the same on every page. This here could be different on each page. All right? I might have a page that has 2 sections in it. All right? I might have a page that has a section and an aside. And of course, the content inside the section is going to be different. I'm going to have different images, different text, and so on. So, this is really the area that we're going to change when we actually clone our template and make our different pages. The rest of it, I hope we have down. So we don't have to change it from page to page. All right? So in this way, if you have to make 5 pages for a website, it doesn't take you 5 times as long as making 1 page. It takes you a certain amount of time to do 1 page, the first page being the longest to do, and then each page after that will be only a fraction of the time. I don't know, a quarter of the time maybe? Who knows? Because you shouldn't be redoing the navigation, you shouldn't be redoing the header, you shouldn't be redoing the footer, you should only be working on that section, the content area. All right, so in my header, I'm going to put H1, interesting places in Ohio. And then maybe I'll write a little paragraph about it. I'm a lifetime resident of Ohio. There are a lot of cool places I visited. These are my favorites. I hope you can visit some of these. All right. So what I'm doing is I'm just putting something in the header that just describes the purpose of the website, right? You shouldn't have to guess what a website is about. When you go to a website, you should look at it and say, oh, that's what this is about. This is a Cleveland Browns fan website. This is a website about the coronavirus. All right? This is a website about the video game Tetris. This is a website comparing Android and iPhones, or whatever. It should be obvious to you at a glance the purpose of the website. So you don't have to sit there and stare and figure out, like, what is the site for? So therefore, make it obvious. So right in the header of the page, I give it a good descriptive title, and I even wrote a little paragraph that explains, hey, this is the purpose of the site. Okay? So, my navigation, typically navigations, you can consider them to be unordered lists with each link an LI, and we said we'd have 5 pages. Generally speaking, the home page you probably want to call index.html. And then we said we had 4 others. We have our Cedar Point. Rock and Roll Hall. So those are our links and our navigation. I'm obviously doing this just for a small site, right? I don't think it would benefit anyone for you guys to watch me type for an hour, all right? So not really going into, anything too intensive. You can add whatever you want to or you need to any of these sections. For example, maybe you would have an image in the header. You could do that. I didn't put one in, but if you were doing this for your project and you really wanted it to have a nice look, you could have something like, the state bird, cardinal, or a silhouette of the map of Ohio, or something like that. This is the part that's going to be different from page to page. So I don't know what's going to be in there for each page yet. So in my template, I'm just going to put in some Greek text. We talked about Greek text before. Greek text is just a placeholder that you can use to just fill some space. And I'm going to copy this paragraph here. Because it is a placeholder, I want to make sure I have about as much as I expect to be on a page. So if I expect to be one paragraph there, I'm going to put one paragraph there. If I expect there to be 5 paragraphs, I'll put 5 paragraphs. Okay? And finally, the last part will be the footer. And I'm just going to make a simple paragraph that says, copyright (2020) my contact information. Okay. So, I'm going to go save this in my folder. And I'm going to call it template.html. Okay. So now, I can view it if I want to in a browser by double-clicking it. Now, it looks very plain because there's absolutely no styling to it. So, it takes a style from the default. All right? What portions of this are going to be the same on every page? This and this. What portion is going to be different on every page? This. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my CSS. Remember that I don't have to get my CSS perfect because the CSS is going to be all in one file. So if I have further refinements to it, then I can just make the changes in that one file and it will take place everywhere. So I'm going to start off by creating a new file, and What would good colors for the state of Ohio be? I think there are two good answers here.
Is that red and green?
Red and green? Okay.
Red is one.
All right.
Red and gray.
Red and gray, all right, is good because that's Ohio State's. And red, white, and blue would be good because that's the colors of Ohio's flag. So those would be, if I was doing it, I would probably pick one of those. I probably would, with all due respect to Ohio State, I probably would pick red, white, and blue, simply because there are a whole bunch of colleges in Ohio other than Ohio State. I know that's hard for people from Ohio State to believe, but there are other colleges other than Ohio State, and therefore Ohio's more than just that. So, but the flag, the state's under one flag for everyone, so I'll use the flag's colors. Now, it doesn't mean I have to go crazy with the red, white, and blue. I don't have to make it like it's a 4th of July ad. I can be a little subtle about it, so it's not beating people over the head, you know. But again, I can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to put star margin 0. It's going to get rid of all the margins everywhere on the page. Remember, what you don't set, the web page gets from is defaults. So I don't want any default margins anywhere. So I'm going to put header margin top 40 pixels. That means that the header will start 40 pixels down. And I'm going to put a border red. I know some people prefer to do this with their CSS code. One thing per line, and you can do that if you want. I'm going to give it a width of 600 pixels. And I'm going to say margin 0 auto. And for border, I'm going to say 1px solid. All right. I'm going to save this as my page's CSS. So I'm going to call it style.css. And then I'm going to go and link my template to this style. How do we do that? Again, it's in the head section. We say link href equals. Our style is in the same folder as the HTML document, so I just use the name. Rel equals style sheet. If I can type. Type equals text slash CSS. And away I go. So now if I look at that file in the browser, and notice I do this. You don't have to close the browser or Notepad++ every time you make a change. When you make a change to something, be sure you save it. Then you can just go in the browser and you can just click refresh. All right. and that's what it looks like. The width I made 600 pixels, so it's 600 pixels wide. I used a margin of 0 on the top and auto on the right and left, so therefore it automatically centers it. But there's no margin from the top of the page. If I wanted to put margin on the top of the page, I could say this. Oh, I thought I did. Oh, I actually did the margin twice, and I confused it. I could say margin 40 pixels, 0, auto. Margin is one of those shorthand attributes where I could say margin dash top, margin dash right, margin dash left, margin dash bottom. Or I can say margin and it goes clockwise. This is the top, this is the right, this is the bottom, this is the left. So if I do that and look at this, now there's a little space at the top of the page. I'm going to go for a little bit bolder of a border, and I'm going to make it 10 pixels wide. Why not? All right, thicker border. Now, notice how the text is smashed up right up against the border. That doesn't really look good. It's nice that there's a little bit of a space. So, space between the border and the text is called padding. And I can specify padding top, padding right, padding bottom, padding left, or I can just give one value for the padding. And I can say padding 10 pixels. And that gives a little bit of space. It makes it a little bit easier and nicer to read. So what do we have for our box so far? We have margin. All right? We have margin, padding, width, and border. Margin is the space between this box, the header box, and the other things on the page. Or even the frame of the window, the border of the window. So I said 40 pixels of margin. That's 40 pixels from the top of the page to here. I said auto margin for the right and left, and that will center it. And then I said 0 pixels for the bottom margin. That will put the next thing directly underneath it. Okay? I said border 10 pixels, red, solid. So 10 pixels, red, and solid. The browser's smart enough to know if I say border colon red, that red refers to the color, right? Because that's the only thing that makes sense, right? It's not going to be how wide is it, it's red. No, it's how wide is it. The only number that makes sense there is 10 pixels. What's the style of it? It's solid. It's a solid line. And finally, the color. So I could write out border dash color red, border dash width 10px, border dash style solid, or I can use these shorthand approaches to doing that. Finally, you have the padding. And the padding is the space between the border and where the text starts. So, if we want to know how much space this takes going across, we actually have to add together the width, the border, and the padding. So that box actually takes 640 going across. How did I get 640? Well, the width is 600. There's 10 on the right, 10 on the left of padding. That goes up to 620. There's 10 on the right, 10 on the left of border. So that's 640. So this, from here to here, is 640 pixels. All right. We're running low on time. I'm going to finish up by just essentially cloning this for the nav, the section, and the footer. And then we'll come back and we'll change it next time to sort of refine it. Only thing I'm going to do is, just to make the theme more red, white, and blue, I'm going to change the border color on the nav and the footer to be blue. Oh, I also want to get rid of this margin at the top. I wanted the margin at the very top to be from the top of the page, but I want these things to be right on top of each other. So like that. Okay. My suggestion between now and then, if you have time, is to play with this. Change the width, change the padding, change the margins, change the colors, and so on. We're going to do a lot more to this to make it look a lot different than it currently is. All right, but we're going to keep this basic layout. All right, and then at some point we'll actually clone these pages so that we have our 5 pages. All right, that's all I had for class today. We'll see you over in lab.